Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. The holidays can be a time of celebration and as well as a time of joy at this time of year, and it can be extremely difficult. Our panelists today will be discussing getting through the holiday season. One important thing for you to remember as we go along and you follow along with us today is that our webinar is informational. If you are experiencing any challenges, we encourage you to seek therapeutic support. Today, you will meet three of our family services therapists here at Kendrick Place. We have Shelby Johnson, one of our newest therapists to join our team, who specializes in DBT, CBT, and systematic family counseling. We also have Alyssa Brooks Long, who specializes in CBT, mindfulness based practices, and family systems. Also, we have Alexandria Morris, who specializes in marriage and family therapy, CBT, and acceptance and commitment therapy here. So I look forward to the information that we share today and take it from here.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for that introduction, Ashley. I'm so excited to be here to talk about what the holidays mean for everyone and when that is sometimes difficult or challenging. And so sometimes that can be because there are certain parts of the holidays that are reminders to us. So whether that be the loss of a loved one, memories that are not our favorite or positive memories around this time, sometimes changes in our lives. So new family dynamics can really throw us for a challenge during the holidays, trying to figure that out. But also if we are single or away from loved ones, so experiencing some loneliness or not having our people near us during this time when it's usually considered joyful or special or important to us and other people, can also be not as fun and not as joyful for these different reasons. And so we'll get a chance to talk through these points here and kind of give some tips and some feedback as we step into the holidays this year that hopefully are helpful for each of you. And so as we look at grief is one of those points that I mentioned that during the holidays can be really hard. And so one thing that I find to be helpful is recognizing that grief has no timeline. It is not the same for every person. And so giving ourselves that space and that permission to grieve, stepping into grief with compassion and grace for ourselves instead of judgment or criticism, and recognizing that it's okay to have some sadness, to miss that person, to long for that person to be here with us, especially during holidays when there are sometimes traditions or certain special things that you would do together. And so what can be helpful is one, giving yourself that space. It doesn't have to be an either or, it can be a both and. So recognizing that if there's moments or days where there is joy and happiness happening for you, but then there's moments where there's sadness and grief, that's okay. Both can have space in your life. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. Finding equal balance in both. What else can be helpful is honoring that person through their memories, sometimes through those traditions. So doing some of those familiar traditions or creating new traditions can be helpful in this time of the year. I saw a video of someone sharing their grief, and they called it like their offense to grief. And so they honored their loved one in their life. I think this was their parent, by doing kind of acts of service. If they saw someone out and about doing something that their parent enjoyed, so that was usually breakfast or getting coffee, they would typically kind of pay it forward for that person and say, this is kind of in honor of my mom. This is something that helps me in my grief process. And so finding something that is meaningful to you during this season can be something that connects you, that is significant. Even when that person's not physically here, you can still honor them for the ways that they are still important to you. Other things that we can do in our grief is connecting to other people or connecting to a higher power. So if spirituality is part of your life, connecting to that, but also connecting to people in our lives, our support systems, our friends, our family, whoever that might be. to have connection, to have support. This is kind of a balance sometimes, right? So having boundaries in that, recognizing when we need that support or want that, and when we kind of just want some space for ourselves or to self-care. And it's okay for both. It's kind of like that joy and grief coexisting, having connection and space with people, but also having time for ourselves and self-caring in other ways by setting boundaries is good too. And so that can look like a lot of different ways. I would say the most important thing is that communicating those boundaries and communicating when, you need some space, or you need to step away, or you don't want to talk about those things right now, but also leaning into when you do want people to check in or ask questions or hold space for you. Both are fine, but sometimes we need one or the over the other, depending on what we're grieving and how we're grieving. And so again, finding those needs and identifying with them, but then communicating them. At the end of the day, just honoring yourself and checking in with yourself, kind of saying, what do I need? What is important for me today or tomorrow when I'm noticing that grief come up, and that sadness? Is it going for a walk? Is it making a meal for ourselves? Is it calling a friend? Is it maybe doing one of those traditional things that have significance to that person that you're honoring, right? What are those things that are important to you? And also comforting and nurturing to ourselves too, because again, you're important, and showing up for ourselves is going to be important during this season, and not having to kind of not have certain boundaries or limits for ourselves. That's a way we can honor ourselves and our needs during this time. And so I hope that everyone finds that for themselves during this season, and finds people that can be that support for them.
Okay. So Alyssa has provided us with some great examples outlining why the holidays can be hard. So now we're going to take an opportunity to talk a bit further and identify tips that will help us to navigate singleness and loneliness during the holiday season. Okay, so the holidays can bring up an array of emotions, feelings, and thoughts, some good and some that are a bit tougher to manage. So many people have an expectation of what the holidays should look like, and oftentimes struggle to find meaning when their reality doesn't quite meet their expectations. So remember that being married or not does not define you. Go easy on yourself. And while you're at it, don't allow others to put expectations on you either. Hallmark movies do not compare to real life. So here's a good tip to be mindful of: what you are watching and what you are listening to, because that can have a tremendous influence on how you feel. So for example, if you are struggling with loneliness, it may not be a good idea to listen to What Do the Lonely Do at Christmas. Listen to something that is more upbeat and will challenge how you are feeling. Okay. Again, the holidays can bring up a lot of emotions. So this may be your first year celebrating without a loved one, or you are celebrating this year differently than you have in previous years. Either way, it is an adjustment. So allow yourself to grieve without judgment. Grief looks differently, as Alyssa already stated. It looks differently for all of us. So don't be so hard on yourself, because it is not always an easy process. As aforementioned, the holidays can bring up memories that we have had with loved ones who have passed away. So try to think of the happy memories. And if it helps you to recreate those happy times and traditions, then do so. What that can look like is maybe baking a cake that your grandmother or your mother made, or doing something, going to get a Christmas tree with you and your father. Okay. So this is also a great time for you to identify the people who make up your support system. The tough times aren't as hard, at least I find that they aren't as hard when we have safe and supportive people to lean on. So if it helps you to be around others, this will be a great time to possibly attend a holiday party, or even attend a church service to satisfy your spiritual needs. This is a great opportunity to give love, support, and care, and to also receive it. Attending holiday parties and dinners are a great way to celebrate and connect. They can also be a source of anxiety as you may be faced with some unwanted questions. There may be some topics of discussion that you are just not comfortable with and you may not be willing to discuss. It is okay for you to set conversational boundaries. For example, Mom, I do not want to talk about why I'm not married yet. I don't want to talk about, why I'm not having kids, or, talking to your grandfather. I don't want to talk about my political views, and I don't want to talk about my spiritual views. Okay. And lastly, feel free to come up with your own tradition and do things that help you to find meaning during this holiday season. Okay. So new family dynamics can also add to the heart of the holidays. Trying to maintain family traditions and creating your own can be a bit of an adjustment. I believe a predetermined game plan will be key in helping you to navigate this and will also reduce some stress. So map out how you plan to spend your time and with who you plan to spend your time with. You may have just welcomed a new baby and may feel pressure to go everywhere and do everything because everyone wants to meet the new addition. As new parents, it can be stressful and overwhelming trying to meet everyone's expectations. So whatever plans you come up with and whatever works for you, stick to it. Don't settle for others making plans for you, especially if it doesn't work for you. Also, don't allow others to have impact on your feelings about your plans. Don't allow them to make you feel guilty. Remember, your plans are in the best interest of you. The holidays will, recreate opportunity for us to share space with family members that we probably haven't seen in a while. And that's not always easy. We may find that to be a bit difficult for various reasons. So to that, I would say, learn to forgive. Remember, forgiveness is for you. And I know that may sound a little bit cliche, but it is. It's for you and it's not the other way around. Learn to coexist and understand that you are not expected to be friends, okay? And lastly, be open and respectful to others' traditions as we will expect the same in return. Find a way to meet in the middle. Personally, my husband and I, we both come from big families. And so he has some traditions on his family side that he likes to do. And so do I. And so we find that just coming with, a predetermined plan for our individual family always works best. He is able to get a little bit of what he wants, and I'm able to get a little bit of what I want. So find a way to meet in the middle.
Andrea very eloquently discussed a lot of things along the lines of coping ahead and working through issues such as loneliness and grief and things like that. And so sort of how I wanted to shape the conversations, discussing how to work through triggers and unhealthy behaviors. I know some of those are sort of cliche words, but I think those are very important words to discuss because as we've so discussed already, the holidays, while beautiful and wonderful and lovely for some, can be disastrous and dreadful to others. And so what I wanted to sort of touch on is how to work through those unhealthy behaviors. The first point is to be kindly selfish. And by that we mean some of us struggle with substance use. Some of us struggle with eating and overeating as a way to fill our emotions. Some of us, it might be of the sexual nature, whatever that might be. But a lot of people have different ways that they manifest their triggers or manifest their griefs and anxieties and things like that. And so by kindly selfish, we mean do what you have to do to take care of yourself. For some people, that might look like refusing a drink at the office work party, or that might mean leaving early from a dinner if it feels like it's getting out of hand. And so before it gets to the level of needing to feel like we need that drink or that extra slice of cake or that whatever that might look like in your life, it's okay to take care of yourself first. Again, at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to be able to take care of yourself. And really and truly, even in a relational standpoint, we can only be as friendly and loving as possible if we're taking care of ourselves first. You only have so much to give. And if you're giving something you don't have, then what kind of relationship is that at all? And so being able to really take care of ourselves in situations like that. Second point, something that, again, both Alyssa and Alexandria have discussed already, but again, it's very important and fruitful to discuss again, I think, being able to find supportive loved ones and people in our connections, people in our zones, people in our corners, if you will. And so that could look like anything. For some of us, it might just be friends and siblings or parents, whoever. For some of us, it might be sponsors if we're a part of the recovery community. For some of us, it might be co-workers, especially if we have recently moved into a new area or a new town. Same with church friends and things like that, especially again, if we are of people who have recently moved into the area and don't have family nearby. Excuse me. Again, important to understand ourselves. For some, again, as we talked about at the top of the slide, for some of us, it might be drug and alcohol. For some, it might be food related, whatever that might be. Sometimes it is easy to have those things around and try to go for those things or use those things to fulfill our sadnesses or our griefs and things like that. And so for some of us, we might need to sterilize our environment. And by that, we mean if we know substances or food or other people might be triggers for us, or they might be things that we go to fulfill our needs. It might look like making sure all the substances are out of our house. It might mean making sure we put our phones on do not disturb to make sure we don't receive that text from that certain person, or maybe even deleting that person's number out of our phone to make sure we don't accidentally text them or call them in a time of emotional weakness. And so what does it mean to sterilize our environment? And to further that point, it's okay to ask for help. Asking for help does not mean weakness. It does not mean that we can't live our lives functionally or properly. Sometimes it simply means we need a helping hand. And so maybe that friend, maybe that confidant, mentor, whoever that might be, someone you trust, maybe even an accountability buddy, can be someone who can help you sterilize your environment and make sure that you don't go down that path. Because again, when things catch us off guard, they are more likely to entrap us. And that kind of goes into our next point. Planning ahead, identifying our triggers and avoiding them. And so for some of us, it might be a certain song. If you are a recently divorced or broken up person, that song that you might hear that you shared with that person. Or it might be, again, going down the political road. I know my uncle, who thinks vastly differently from I do, will say something pretty snarky to me at the dinner table, and that will just set me off, or something to that effect. Knowing ahead of time, going into our dinners, going into our festivities, going into those things, understanding what those things could be that could set us off, if you will, and knowing sort of how to work through that, or basically having an escape plan if you need to. And so what are those things that will really put us in a vulnerable or compromising state emotionally and working through that? And please keep in mind that that is not a surefire way to avoid those things. It is possible that our uncle will just say that one thing that really bothers us, and we do say that unfortunate or crass thing. And again, if we plan for those things, if we know those things are coming, we have a much higher rate of success to avoid those emotional outbursts and those pitfalls, if you will. And then remember too, one thing I like to tell people all the time is, this is not your first Christmas. This is not your first holiday. This is not your first, whatever this might be, your first tough time. Things have happened in our past, and hey, you got through them. This will be no different. Again, if we follow these steps and we understand what's coming ahead and really take the time to take care of ourselves and validate ourselves and find those validating people, we'll get through these moments as well. And then the other thing I think is important to remember, just some sort of general and last minute tips. Again, these are things that are are things that have been discussed before. And again, I think they're important to highlight just in a general sense as well, okay? Keep conversations light and fluffy. I know that sounds silly to some people, and honestly, light and fluffy conversations are the types of conversations that just carry us through the day. There's nothing wrong with just having simple conversations about how the kids are doing, or football season, or whatever those lighter topics are that you enjoy, because 9 times out of 10, the conversation about what little Timmy is doing at school will not cause that same fight or that same knockdown drag out that those opposing political or religious views will have on a family home. And so it's okay to just have small, minute, simple conversations. Christmas and holidays were not meant to have big battles. Something Alexandria touched on pretty eloquently, I think, managing expectations. 9 times out of 10, whatever we visualize as a worst case scenario will not happen. And what we visualize as a best case scenario won't happen either. And so understanding what you're getting into, you know, as big as it is in the media and as big as it is in the eyes of our families, sometimes Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever the holiday is, sometimes it is merely a day. Sometimes it is just Tuesday. They're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be horrible. And understand what you're getting into. If we're dreading that big knockdown drag out with our uncle about this political conversation, again, planning ahead and understanding that that is possible. You're dreading it for a reason, because your uncle has given you reason to believe that this will happen. And so if we manage our expectations of what things are going to be like, and we already have sort of an idea in our minds of how things can go, again, we can start to plan ahead. And the flip side as well, be open to the possibility that it won't be like that. Be open to not being so pigeonholed or stuck in this idea that things will be horrible, because again, 9 times out of 10, things will not be as horrible as we think they will be. Be respectful of how everyone else is feeling. Be respectful of other people's boundaries and emotional states. It is very easy to get very caught in what we need to do to take care of ourselves, which I do wholeheartedly believe is first and foremost important. And again, it's easy to get caught in the trap of just thinking so much about ourselves that we don't think about others. And it's very important that we do, because again, just because I have a certain emotional threshold and I can handle these conversations and these temptations, triggers, etc., doesn't mean other people can. And so if I can handle a drink or two at dinner, or a glass of wine, if you will, doesn't mean that someone can't. And so if someone refuses that glass of wine, it would be disrespectful of me to say, oh no, it's okay, you can have this, it's Christmas, heck, go ahead and have that. It is my place to be respectful and understanding of that boundary, again, even if it isn't my own. Take care of yourself mentally, take care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually. Again, those 4 concepts are extremely intertwined, and it's so vastly important that we do that for ourselves. I know a lot of us have great emphasis on one of those aspects, and they sort of negate the others sometimes. Again, all 4 of those are vastly, vastly important. For some of us, spiritually simply looks like taking walks in nature, meditating, and that's totally fine. We don't mean to put any specific thoughts in your mind. We're just hoping to drive home the point that physical needs are important. Make sure we're eating properly, make sure we're getting all our meals, make sure we're not overeating and things like that. Emotionally, again, making sure we're avoiding these triggers, making sure that we are taking care of ourselves mentally, not dragging ourselves down deep in these negative thoughts. That's not to say just go on thinking happy thoughts and things will be great, but it does mean our mindset does have a great tell on how the rest of our lives will go. If we automatically think negatively, statistically speaking, our day will go negatively. So it's really important that we really take care of ourselves and do what we need to do for ourselves. And of course, finally, just be kind. Again, that's a very cheesy Sesame Street thing to say, and it's true. Things are hard enough as they are in our society, and we don't need to add on to the strife and to the grief of others, or to ourselves. This is the holiday season. If nothing else, this is hopefully that one time of year where people truly do hold kindness and hold boundaries and caring for each other in a high esteem. Because again, what other time of the year will people do that? This is the time of year for that. And so be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other. Whether you love the holidays or hate the holidays, we're just trying to get through them together. And so let's not fight each other. Let's try to actually love each other and care for each other and get through the season together.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you to each one of our presenters today for sharing helpful information about getting through the holidays when the holidays can be a very difficult time. So we had the opportunity to have some questions coming in, so I'll give it another minute or two to see whether or not we have any more questions. I have a few, but I just want to give those who are with us today the opportunity to ask any questions. So before I get into any questions, were there any kind of lasting thoughts or anything more that you want to share to those who are tuning in with us today about getting through the holidays, finding joy and meaning through the holidays?
I think one thing that came to mind as we were all sharing is just being gentle with ourselves. I think that was kind of the tone, or a theme that came up, is just being gentle with ourselves and also gentle with other people, and being willing to understand one another, but also want understanding in return, right? So this is a season sometimes of joy, but also sometimes of dread, like Shelby said. So just taking it day by day, being compassionate with ourselves and with other people.
All right, so I have a question in line with grief. So my grandfather passed away a few years ago, and the holidays have been really tough on my mom. What are some things I can do to help her with her grief during this time of year?
So I can answer that unless someone else, well, we can all kind of answer it if we want. I think there's a lot of things that can be helpful when we have family members who are grieving, or we're grieving with family members too. So in that scenario, grandfather to this person who's asking the question, but also noticing their parent grieves maybe differently or in a way that influences the holidays. And so sometimes just sitting with one another can be super helpful, creating space. If there is tearfulness or crying, welcoming that, not judging or saying don't cry or stop crying, just saying I'm here. Even if we're not sure what to say, sometimes we're not sure what to say when someone is grieving. We can say, I know I might not have the words, but you matter and this matters, and I can sit with you, or I'm here if you want to talk about it, right? So just being present, showing that we're there for them can be really helpful. In my experience with grief and knowing what sometimes the needs are. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It can just be showing up and saying I'm here. That would be my response to that. I'm not sure if there's other suggestions.
Yeah, I'll take a swing at that. Alyssa's so right about that, being just open and available to that. And I think to take that a step further, I think it'd also be pretty paramount to be able to have open and vulnerable conversations about this type of grief. I think in any type of grief, loss, be it death in the family, be it loss of relationship, loss of job, whatever that might be, I think we as a society have a tendency to stuff that in and hold that. We do things to quickly shy away from those feelings. And so I think for this person and their mother to have an open, honest conversation about what their grief looks like or what they're feeling, because again, to Alyssa's point, grief looks like something different for every person. And so for that person and their mother to be able to have an open conversation about what that grief is, so they can be better supports for each other. Because again, while this person wrote in about their mother and about their grandfather, that was their maternal grandfather as well. And so there's grief on both ends, I would imagine. So for the two parties to be able to really have an open dialogue about what the other person needs, or what their grief might look like for them, or how they would like to sort of see that through. Because again, there might not be a definitive answer on that. And it's good and healthy for the mother and son or daughter to be able to have those conversations about their sadness and their grief and things like that.
So I honestly agree. Shelby, you expressed my sentiments exactly. I agree with both of you, because I know that, grief is, like you said, difficult to deal with. And the conversations around that, again, can be absolutely, difficult as well. And I find personally that a lot of times we try to project our own feelings and our own ways of dealing with things, that we don't create an opportunity or a safe space for people to deal with it in their own way. And so, as aforementioned, like, just having a conversation of what that looks like, because sometimes, again, we try to give what people may not want or what people may not need. So someone may need, some alone time, but we feel like, hey, I want to be with you. I want to, stand in the gap for you. And that may not look the same way for everybody. So just having that tough conversation and being able to identify, again, because it does look differently for each one of us, what that looks like and what each person may need. And then just having that flexibility, because for one moment, someone may want to be alone, and then another moment they want to be comforted. And so just being flexible and being understanding that that it's a process. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you for each one of you for sharing that. So I have one more question that I think is like really important, as you guys kind of shared some of these things, and I think this person needs just a little bit more in terms of tips. So this person is a people pleaser who is especially comes from family and tends to overextend themselves during the holidays, and so they want to get in a better place of establishing boundaries, and it's very difficult. So what are any tips that you have for setting boundaries, especially to someone who is new to it?
I have a lot of thoughts to, start it out, because boundaries itself, are difficult. Being able to set boundaries can be difficult, and the pressure of the holidays can add to that anxiety, or that, that hard of, being able to set boundaries just in general. Yeah. I guess kind of want us to just have like an open conversation about it, because I do kind of have a lot of, mixed feelings and thoughts as it relates to that.
Yeah, boundaries are hard, Alexandra. I agree. And sometimes it can be a broad topic, because what does that mean to each person, right? Especially someone who's new to trying to set those limits or even know what those boundaries are. So sometimes it's reflecting on what are my limits, what is my capacity or my threshold, kind of how Shelby said. Communicating them, I think, is one of the biggest steps if you're starting to learn boundaries, is communicating them with people. We can't have boundaries with people that don't know what they are, right? We can't expect people to respect our boundaries if they don't know what they are. And so communicating them is really helpful. And then one thing that is kind of that addendum to that is being consistent. So, holding true to your boundaries, honoring them, sometimes having to over communicate them time and time again, because we're learning them, but also people in our lives are trying to learn how to respect them too. And so there's going to be mistakes and slip ups. And so just continuing to be consistent in them, honoring that for ourselves, and knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect, and it probably won't. We're probably going to have to keep learning and adjusting and recommunicating it. But yeah, there's a lot of thoughts around boundaries and what those might mean for you, whether it's certain conversations you're okay with, or how you show up for holidays, or who you have over, or how plans are made, right? Lots of different boundaries and different ways that shows up in the holidays for sure.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned consistency, which is very important. And one of the things that I do when I'm working on boundaries with a lot of my clients is also working on consequences and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't physically do anything to people, but I think, having a consequence for when boundaries are overstepped is really something that is really great to have as well. And so maybe that may look like, I am not going to come, if my boundaries are not being honored, if they're not being respected. And then I heard you mention, Ashley, that the individual said that they are, a people pleaser as well. And I think a lot of what we talked about throughout this whole conversation is just honoring yourself. What is it that you need, and not feeling guilty about, stating what you need, or feeling pressured because other people may want to kind of dump or have expectations of you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's really hard. Boundaries are definitely another level when people pleasing is kind of our way of functioning, or the role we put ourselves in, or may have been growing up. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for answering these questions, because the holidays, again, can be a very difficult time. So I think it's very awesome that you three were able to share some insight on how to get through what sometimes is very difficult for many individuals for many different reasons. So I would love to talk more about the services that we have. Any ending thoughts before we talk a little bit about KP? For you all.
No, don't think so.
Awesome. All right. So for you guys, if you guys enjoyed our webinar on today, this afternoon, please look into the services that we provide here at Kindred Place. We have family and individual counseling. Also, we're talking about the difficult times in which the holidays can be for most. So we are going to have a managing holiday stress support group that will be taking place during the holiday season, so that you can get the extra support out of the resources that we got and gave today. We have several workshops that we'll be presenting. We also have nurturing parenting resources here at Kindred Place Mindful Movement. So you see a list of all our awesome programs that we offer here at Kindred Place. On the next slide, we'll be able to provide you with the information to get in contact with us. We have a great team here at Kindred Place, so you can take a look at our website. You can take a look at our social media. We are located at 2180 Union if you want to drop in to see and get a listing of the programs that we have. And please sign up for our newsletter to get and stay connected with us during this time. So thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much for Shelby Johnson, who also presented some helpful information. Stay safe, and thank you so much for today.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.